You're listening to the Greek's Gridiron. Now here's your host, Ethan Hristodoulou.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Greek's Gridiron. I am Ethan Hristodoulou, and today, coming off the heels of the NFL draft this past weekend, we are diving in and taking a look at winners and losers. Yes, just, 2 days now removed from the wrap-up of the NFL draft. We're talking winners and losers here. Obviously, way too early to do it, but it's always fun to speculate and dive in and give instant reactions. So that's basically what I'm doing with you all here today. I invite you all, comment down below. How did your favorite team do in the draft in your eyes? Maybe division rivals who had a great draft, who had a bad draft. If you look at other teams around the league, how are you feeling about all of those things coming out of the 2025 NFL draft? I have 5 winners and 3 losers. I always try to keep these things a little bit more positive. I don't like to focus too much on the negative, but there are negative things that I need to point out from this draft. So without further ado, we'll start at the very top, work our way through my list here. The very first winner I have on here, and a lot of people are giving this team a ton of high marks, and I've got to say, wasn't expecting it, but everyone seems to love it. The New England Patriots. Drake May is a winner coming out of this draft. And honestly, this entire offseason, you could probably sum up as a giant win for Drake May himself. From the new head coach to an entirely revamped team altogether from top to bottom, that Mike Vrabel has come in, kicked the door in, and essentially just revamped this roster more to the style of what he likes, bringing back that aggressive, hard-nosed style of ball that Mike Vrabel teams are known for. No-nonsense type of attitude. We've seen the culture get set through leaked videos. There is so much turnover for this team this year, and it all feels positive. And it got pushed even further this year in the draft, with the Patriots, of course, in round number 1 at pick 4, opting to go with offensive tackle Will Campbell. Whether you believe he is a starting guard or tackle in the NFL, in my eyes, is personally irrelevant. Because for me, as somebody who grew up rooting for the Colts, I watched that team go and draft Quentin Nelson, who has been phenomenal for that team despite all the struggles the team has been with. If you can get, and they picked him at number 6, so only 2 picks further back than the Patriots picking at number 4. And I would argue that draft class that Quentin Nelson was in was a little bit more stacked than the draft that we got this year, which a lot of people considered more on the downside in terms of overall talent, especially top-end talent. So whether the Patriots get a guard, and I know you're hoping he is the left tackle for the next 10 years, whether or not he becomes that or a guard, in my eyes, does not matter. The goal for this offseason was to protect Drake May, and this pick right here, from what it sounds like, had been solidified for quite some time, and the Patriots were very much going to get Will Campbell for a far longer period than I think a lot of people were willing to realize. I myself think that was a home run selection, and then just the constant addressing of the offense as we went further and further into the draft. In the second round, of course, you get Ohio State explosive running back Travion Henderson, who will be great to pair with Ramondre Stevenson, who, after a season as kind of the bell cow back with a ton of fumbles and just maybe not quite the pop we're used to seeing from Ramondre, could probably do for a legitimate running mate. Batman Robin-esque type of pairing. Whether one or the other is the Batman to the Robin does not really matter to me, but you need a kind of 1-2 punch combo paired with Ramondre, and I think Travion's style complements his perfectly. On top of that, you had Antonio Gibson, who looked pretty solid for what was a bit of a mess of an offense last year. Then in the third round, you have wide receiver Kyle Williams out of Washington State. In my eyes, one of the best third-round selections of that entire round there, considered the separation king of this draft class. A lot of people surprised he even made it that far to the New England Patriots, and a lot of people seem to agree, a bit of a no-brainer selection considering the current state of the Patriots roster going into the draft. Then in the fourth round, 4 straight picks, offense, something that I can't even, and I didn't do the research on this, so shame on me, I guess I should say, but I can't tell you the last time I remember the Patriots going offense 4 straight picks to kick off a draft. If someone wants to tell me the last time that happened, fire away in the comments section. But going after Georgia center Jared Wilson, who a lot of people looked at as one of the best true centers in this draft as well. It was all in on Drake May during the early portions of this draft, and that was exactly how this needed to go. And then you can even sprinkle in the 7th round selection of Marcus Bryant out of Missouri, who is 6'7", 320 pounds. I mean, taking a flyer on a mountain of a man at offensive tackle. I'm very impressed with what the Patriots were willing to do in this draft more than anything else. Yes, you could maybe poke fun at the fact that they drafted a kicker and a long snapper and that some things just don't change in New England for whatever the reason may be, no matter who is in charge over there in the front office and in the head coaching spot. But overall, this was all about refortifying an offense and building around Drake May, and he's got to be one happy camper coming out of this year's draft class and going into next season. My first loser on my list here, and as I mentioned just a few moments ago, grew up rooting for the Colts, watching them select an offensive guard in Quentin Nelson at pick number 6, watching them go after and select Tyler Warren here. I'm excited, but I did mark Tyler Warren as a loser because of this selection here, not because of anything that has to do with Tyler Warren. Let me make that extremely clear. I honestly can't believe that he did fall down to the Colts in this draft. I did a mock a couple of weeks ago for the first round, and I managed to build out the mock so that Tyler Warren just happened to go to Indianapolis, and that wasn't even really something I was trying to do. It just kind of happened that way. But listen, I'm excited for what Tyler Warren brings to Indianapolis, and I think he's going to be a beautiful complement to what is one of the more fun and talented wide receiver rooms in the NFL overall. And I know that maybe sound like a biased take, but let me finish here. I feel like this selection is probably for whoever is going to take over at quarterback down the road for the Colts and not necessarily for Daniel Jones or Anthony Richardson. I am not the most positive Colts fan, and at times I'm even willing to go as far as saying that I barely even root for them at this point in my life. The Andrew Luck situation burned me as a Colts fan, and it's one of those things that it helped me remove myself from fandom and allow me to enjoy the NFL overall more than anything else. So yes, soft spot still in place for the Indianapolis Colts, but I'm not living and dying with every win and loss the way I was growing up here. And with so much uncertainty surrounding the quarterback right now, and just a team that is in a really weird place right now and has been struggling to solidify that spot since Andrew Luck's retirement, whoever the next quarterback is, I think is going to benefit far greater than whoever the current quarterback is going to be in this 2025 season, because my expectations and my hopes are in the basement right now is probably the nicest way I could put it as far as to what this next season looks like. So if it goes south and it gets ugly, unfortunately, we're looking towards the following year where if we get lucky and Arch Manning comes out and the Colts are picking number 1, we get to run it back with a Manning. And if it's not him and he chooses to stay a second season, maybe it's one of the other quarterbacks that come out. But my dream scenario would be another Manning wearing the horseshoe on his helmet. But the reality is I'm not super high on what the Colts are going to be doing this season. It's hard for me to even really get excited considering Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson is the quarterback battle for this training camp and preseason. But I guess we'll see what happens there. But unfortunately, Tyler Warren, I wish you the best, but my hopes are not high for your first season in Indianapolis. I'm really looking forward to whatever happens beyond the current quarterback situation in Indy. We'll go back on a more positive note, though, taking a look at another winner here, and this one just made so much sense to me. Another guy that I mocked correctly in my first round mock draft, and that's going to be Omarion Hampton from UNC getting drafted by the Chargers. Now, the combo that he presents with Najee Harris and, of course, himself is one of the more exciting pairings at running back that I cannot stress enough that I am looking forward to the most to see this season here. You know what Najee Harris's game is all about. Ground and pound. He'll grind it out. Career average of only 4 yards per carry, yes, but he is somebody who is not afraid of contact, and he will use himself as a battering ram to just beat opposing defenses down and wear them out. And then in comes Omarion Hampton, who a little more elusive, a little bit more of a shifty guy, but still considered by many a power style of running back. You're just going to be hammering away at opposing defenses at this point here, and I could not have picked a better head coach for Hampton to land with, because a lot of people scratching their heads after this selection. You have Najee Harris. Why are you double dipping at running back here? It's Jim Harbaugh's style of football. He loves that ground and pound mentality, and now you look at the connection that you're seeing from Justin Herbert and Ladd McConkey this past season with the addition of a second round wide receiver in Trey Harris. This offense looks far and away better than it did last year. A lot of people, yes, it was not a perfect situation, but a lot of people, including myself, even surprised with some of the production that Chargers offense was even able to put together when it felt like a bit of a patchwork running back room that they put together last offseason. Now you have two legit guys who a lot of people would consider number ones on other team if given the opportunity to. Hell, Najee Harris was literally a number one for 4 years, and say what you want about him. 4 seasons in the NFL, 4 1,000-yard seasons. He's productive. He can be that 1A, 1B, regardless of whichever one you want him to be, paired up with Omarion Hampton. I cannot wait to see that running back, especially when we get into like November, December season, and we're just watching these running backs pound away at opposing defenses that are not meant to stop that style of offense. And again, things will open up even further now because Ladd McConkey hopefully has a real running mate in Trey Harris. Justin Herbert has more options to throw the football to. This is a Chargers offense that I think is going to be a lot more exciting in year number 2 of the Jim Harbaugh era and could cause some major headaches for opposing defenses. Next person we'll discuss here, not really a person, I guess it's a person and also a group of people at the same time here. Another winner, and this time I am looking at the Green Bay Packers fan base, and I think I should also throw like Jordan Love in there as well. But Packers fans at pick number 24 for the first time since 2002, when the Green Bay Packers were hosting the NFL draft, you had the announcement made. A first-round wide receiver is joining what is, in my eyes, one of the more deep wide receiver rooms in the NFL, arguably one of the deepest, if not the deepest wide receiver room in the NFL. Matthew Golden will force defenses to stretch with the big-time speed that he comes into the league with here, and just gives Jordan Love another weapon to work with. Now, again, the wide receiver room is really deep, and arguably it's really, really crowded at this current point right now. Just to list off the group of wide receivers here, and there's obviously jokes to be made about, it's just a bunch of, number 2 wide receivers working here. I mean, at this point, when you look at a team like the Patriots or the Chargers, a bunch of number 2 wide receivers would probably benefit those rosters here. So I don't really think that the Packers are in a bad place by any means. And I think you have some guys that could evolve into number 1s here as they continue to progress through their career. So jokes be damned, but you have Matthew Golden now, Christian Watson, who if he could just stay healthy and that hamstring could just not give him issues, I think it could be even more productive now with the presence of Golden. But you also have Jaden Reed, you have Romeo Doubs, who makes circus catches. If it's not every other week, it's like every 2 or 3 weeks. You have Dontavian Wicks, who's like Mr. Reliable over there in Green Bay, coming out of nowhere and being extremely effective. And you got a speedster in McCole Hardman as well. The wide receiver room in Green Bay is loaded. It is one of the deepest rooms from top to bottom. Like, a lot of these guys are legitimate number 2s or like 2A, 2B type of guys on a lot of other rosters. And now we're at the position where some of these guys are now in like year 2 or 3 of their rookie contracts. And we're going to find out if they can actually elevate to that number 1 status here. So this is one of the more exciting wide receiver rooms in terms of talent, but also one of the more exciting wide receiver rooms to kind of see who takes that next leap and who really takes their game to the next level here. And I think Matthew Golden is really going to help out whoever that guy is, whether it's him himself or one of those other guys like Doubs, Watson, or Reed, who can really elevate themselves this year and separate and become that true number 1 receiver. I mean, you just have so much talent in Green Bay right now to work with when it comes to passing the football. The Green Bay Packers are going to be a nightmare to defend for secondaries for years to come at the current rate that they're picking up wide receivers. We'll switch back over to losers, and we actually got a couple of them back to back here. And this first loser of the 2 we'll talk. I don't love the idea of banking on physical traits with a lack of production in round number 1 of the draft, and the Bengals going Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M is the prime example of that. This feels like we were hoping somebody else was potentially here for us to select, and it just didn't work itself out for whatever the reason may be. But for me, when I look at the Cincinnati Bengals and what was a horrendously lackluster pass rush last season, where it was literally Trey Hendrickson and nobody else, I would love to have seen them bring in a guy who came in with legitimate collegiate production at a really high rate, so you can at least feel better about the person you're bringing in. I understand the love and the excitement surrounding Shamar Stewart that scouts seem to just adore about him. I mean, he's got all the physical strengths or traits, with the size, the strength, the athleticism. Like, he has everything. He is, if you were to, and like, literally his draft descriptions from notes that I've read, literally chiseled from stone with freak athleticism. Like, I get it. Believe me, I do. I'm a big traits guy myself, but when we're talking like late day 2, day 3 type of guys is when I really like to lean into those physical traits that you just can't teach. Whereas you have Shamar Stewart, 1.5 sacks basically every single season of his collegiate career. So you're totaling 4.5 over the time that he was in Texas A&M. And yes, he's got all the physical traits and all the tools. And, you know, a lot of coaches will believe if I could just get my hands on that guy, I could turn him into his fullest potential and turn him into the pass rusher he should be. I just don't know about that. And yes, there are prime examples, don't get me wrong, of guys that are physical trait guys who have all the tools and with the right coaching could potentially become what those physical traits should eventually lead into. Like, I think as recently as Jacksonville's drafting of Trayvon Walker the year he and Aiden Hutchinson were coming out, you had a guy like Aiden Hutchinson who had a lot of the similar tools, but maybe not quite as much of an athlete as a Trayvon Walker was, but still had all the production and everything like that in comparison to Trayvon Walker, who was an absolute athletic freak for a guy his size at the position he's playing. And now you look at the turnover on him and what you've got from him, the end result, 20.5 sacks the last couple of seasons is not bad in my eyes here. Double-digit sacks in back-to-back seasons. You love to see that. So don't get me wrong. There's prime examples of this strategy here working. It's just a matter of you're gambling on a first-round selection so early in the draft. What was it, pick 16, 17, whatever it was they were at. So I guess midpoint, not super early, but I'm just not in love with it. And I understand as well, Abdul Carter's gone, Michael Williams is gone, Jalen Walker's gone, all before you selected. So it's, you know, you're kind of stuck with doing what you want. But if the option was there, and at this point, I don't know if the Bengals had options on the table and they just did not opt to move, or maybe they just didn't get the opportunity to move back. But like, if you could have traded back further into the draft and get a guy like Donovan Ezeraku or Marshall's Mike Green, something along those lines, I think I would have liked those, because you're at least bringing in guys who had a ton of production in college. Sure, maybe you look at Marshall's Mike Green and you go, well, that his level of competition is not quite up to the snuff of another guy like a Shamar Stewart where he's playing in the SEC, sure. Or you look at a guy like Donovan Ezeraku, who a lot of people love but are worried about his overall playing strength, but is still a guy who had 16.5 sacks last season and doesn't have to be the guy. You're pairing him with Trey Hendrickson, who, at least at this current moment in time, you believe is going to be there next year. It does not seem like that's changed, at least to this current point here. So I don't know. I'm not in love with the selection. Maybe it's a little bit strong to call him a loser here, but I just feel like that there was a better route you could have gone at number 17 than just selecting maybe the physical freak athlete guy. And you know, maybe it'll benefit him that he doesn't have to be the number one, like I just said, for Donovan Ezeraku or Mike Green. You know, they don't have to be the guy because they're paired along with Trey Hendrickson. So it gives you more opportunity to really take your time and develop Shamar Stewart. Maybe he benefits from that and that works in his favor, but I just would have liked somebody who has more proven production, even if the competition from that production is a little bit lesser than the guys that Shamar Stewart was facing. The loser I have paired up with them will stick in the AFC North here, and I know I have some viewers that I think will, or listeners, whoever, whatever you do as far as consuming this podcast goes, will enjoy this one. The next loser on the list, gonna be Browns fans. I'm sorry, Cleveland. I really, really am. This was one of the more interesting drafts that I've seen unfold, not only this year, but just in recent years altogether. Trading out of selecting Travis Hunter and going after Mason Graham, I guess I understand it, but at the same time, for a team that could use wide receiver help, could use secondary help, and a little bit of both in the same selection, like, I get it. And sure, Jacksonville dangling a ton of compensation your way, you can still get a really good blue chip prospect in a Mason Graham. Like, I get the thought process, I really do. That's just, Travis Hunter is, you know, it's Travis Hunter. You have so much potential upside to work with. Unless something came up during that pre-draft process they just really did not like, or they were just really in love with what the Jacksonville Jaguars offered them to trade out of the position, I mean, I guess so be it. Then you also go ahead and you draft 2 running backs and 2 quarterbacks in this same draft class here. Now, obviously, the Dylan Gabriel from Oregon and Shedeur Sanders as well out of Colorado, so much involved with all of the discussions surrounding that and what was happening to Shedeur Sanders and his freed fall during the entirety of the draft. And there was also the clip that came out, and I wish I could show this, but copyright reasons, obviously I cannot. But the look on the face of the Cleveland Browns war room told me everything I needed to know about them selecting Shedeur Sanders with their final draft pick in this year's draft. And that was, in my eyes, a very clear directive coming straight from either one or the other of the two Haslams. I genuinely hope that Shedeur Sanders works out for Cleveland's sake, more so for the fans than anything else, because the only people losing here are the Browns fans. And at this point, I genuinely fear for you all. This has been a nightmare of a situation for the last handful of seasons going on in Cleveland right now, with how good the team was a couple of years ago to the just drastic fall off this past season. And now, you think Cleveland's in the clear. They're not taking Shedeur Sanders. They went and drafted Dylan Gabriel. You already got 4 quarterbacks on the roster. Question is very much up in the air as to what's going on. And if you want to count only 3, because Deshaun Watson's probably not playing next year as he works from that double torn Achilles, sure, whatever that may be. But then you go and you get the Shedeur Sanders thing now going on for you. And it's just, drama does not seem to fail to find the Cleveland Browns one way or another. And I genuinely have no idea how this is all going to pan itself out. There is a piece of me, the pessimist speaking in me, that thinks it's probably not going to end well and it's probably going to end in disaster. As long as I have literally been a football fan and as long as I have been alive, the Cleveland Browns have not made good decisions. They have not been a good football team. Sure, they've had a couple of spurts here and there where, they've made playoff appearances. Yes, I'll acknowledge that. But consistently, things have just gone up in flames one way or another. And I feel for Browns fans. Like, there is no hate in my soul for Cleveland fans or for the team itself. There is definitely some disdain for the ownership and the people in charge making decisions there. I don't know. I hope that this draft class ends up working out for the best in Cleveland, but I don't know. 2 running backs and 2 quarterbacks in the same draft class on a team that, sure, you could maybe use some running back help, as Nick Chubb's probably not ever going to be the same, but I don't really think you desperately needed to draft 2 running backs, and I definitely don't think you needed to draft 2 quarterbacks to push your room to 5 guys in total now. Like, that's just absurd, right? Is it 5? Joe Flacco, Deshaun Watson, 5 guys. So I don't know. We'll see how this ends up panning itself out. I'm assuming the hope is that maybe you flip one of these 2 quarterbacks down the road. I don't really know if that's going to work with Dylan Gabriel being an undersized guy. And again, Shedeur Sanders, we'll see what happens with him there. But some of the stuff coming out as far as what he may or may not have been doing during the pre-draft process and potentially blowing interviews on purpose is something that just doesn't sit well with what seems to be a lot of people. And clearly, as you can see, where he got picked in this year's draft. But man, oh man, this is just, again, Browns fans, I genuinely feel for you. I really do. There is no hate, ill will in my heart towards you all by any means. I'm not a hater of Cleveland or anything like that. I just, I hope for the best. I really do. We'll finish off on a positive note, though. We got 2 teams here, and once again, sticking in the AFC North, the Ravens. I don't know how this happens year in and year out, where it just feels like the Baltimore Ravens have to do nothing but sit there in the draft and good things fall to them. It really does not make a whole lot of sense to me, but it's just one of those things. Death, taxes, and the Ravens getting incredible prospects without even having to try late in the draft. And this year, by no means any different. Malachi Starks falling to you in round number 1, and then Mike Green falling to you in round number 2. 2 extremely productive guys in college that, even coming into this team right now, don't necessarily have to be like the guy at their position from day number 1. You are afforded the leniency, especially what seems like on the defensive side of the ball, being drafted by Baltimore to be able to come in. And if you're not an immediate impact guy from day number 1, maybe it takes you a season or 2 to get to the level you need to. it's fine because there's usually so much other talent surrounding you. But what Malachi Starks is going to allow that Ravens defense to do, especially with Kyle Hamilton and putting him just all over the football field because he thrives being able to move around, and then what Mike Green is going to add to the defensive front and the pass rush that they desperately needed to work on in my eyes, I genuinely can't believe it. Like, I remember going back to the mock draft I did a couple of weeks ago for the first round. I had Malachi Starks, going to Minnesota because you look at the way he was described by scouts and by people that were following the draft, aggressive, just all-out type of guy, just smash-mouth style of football. I was like, okay, that fits what they're doing in Minnesota. Obviously, he doesn't go there. He dips down and falls to Baltimore, and I go, all right, well, not purple team, not the same team, but another purple team and another defense that fits the exact profile and play style that Malachi Starks comes with. Again, something about the Ravens, man. They don't really have to do a lot, but they find themselves picking extremely good players in like day 2 and even in day number 1 that should not be available to them, considering where they're typically picking, which is the back half of every round in the draft. It just seems to happen all the time, though, for whatever reason, and it's incredibly impressive, but also just like at some point, like you have to go, the football gods are blessing Baltimore, and does this do with the fact that, the football gods obviously do not like what the Colts did to them all those years ago, and so now the Colts, for whatever reason, they have the struggles that they have at this current stage in their tenure in Indianapolis, whereas Baltimore just year in and year out drafting all these great players. Like, if you want to get into the football god conspiracy conversation, we can, but credit to Baltimore, man, because they just have great players fall to them all the time, and it makes no sense to me, but it happens every single offseason. And then last but certainly not least, my final winner and final team to discuss here, the New York Giants, a big winner in this draft. I will say some of my favorite maneuvering out of every single team of the draft board this year. You, of course, have Abdul Carter fall to you at number 3. And this was one of those things that when I did my mock draft for this, I was in the position of you either take Abdul Carter or maybe you trade back and work some magic there. And that, in my eyes, seemed like it would make more sense to me than anything else. Just because you have Kayvon Thibodeau, you have Brian Burns, and on top of that, I'm in the camp that Kayvon Thibodeau is a really good player, especially when he's healthy, and health has been the issue for him. So just in my head, I was like, all right, if you're picking between the two, what makes the most sense to help a team that definitely needs more pieces added to it? I thought trade back, but them taking Abdul Carter did not really surprise me. I was a little surprised to find out that they have picked up the 5th-year option for Kayvon Thibodeau, which means that basically they're just looking at this as cost control for Thibodeau. We can see how this whole unit of 3 pairs for the next couple of seasons and kind of play it out from there. At the very worst, you have to wait till the end of the trade deadline of next season, and you could opt to move on from Kayvon Thibodeau there if you don't want to keep paying all 3 of these guys. So I love the selection regardless. It keeps the pass rush fortified, and it's an impressive trio to be working with here. Last season, you had Azeez Ojulari, you had Brian Burns, and you had Kayvon Thibodeau. Now we have Kayvon Thibodeau, Brian Burns, and now Abdul Carter, which is a plus in my eyes. Then trade yourself back into the first round. You go and get your quarterback of the future that you believe the pressure off his shoulders, because he's the 24th pick, 23rd pick, whatever the number was that he got picked by the Giants in this year's draft. He doesn't have to start day number 1. You have Russell Wilson, you have Jameis Winston, and you have a guy who can learn from 2 pros that have been in the league for so long now. Say what you want about Jameis Winston and the 30 for 30 that he's probably going to have. That's going to talk about his 30 touchdowns in pick season or something like that, whatever you want to call that. And then, of course, Russell Wilson, Super Bowl winning quarterback. There's so much that you can learn from if you're Jackson Dart going into this quarterback room. So you have to feel great about being able to maneuver your way back in to get him in the first round. Then you go into some of those day 2 and day 3 selections here. Defensive tackle Darius Alexander. This was like a lot of draft analysts and just draft heads, like people that love to talk about this kind of stuff, loved this guy on the interior of the defensive line. He was like the IDL darling of this year's draft, where everyone and anyone was like, if you can get this guy in the 3rd round, he's the guy you want to get. And sure enough, here the Giants are going ahead and snatching him up in that 3rd round. And then Cam Scatterbo, a guy that caught so much noise from last season and deservedly so. And then through the offseason as well, his name kept popping up. And I feel like I saw his name all over draft boards. It was like dependent upon how that person felt about Cam Scatabo and how his play is going to translate to the NFL and if he can last in the NFL because of how violent of a runner he is. Great pick, great value in round number 4. Adds some juice to your backfield that you absolutely need as you're continuing to reel from the loss of Saquon Barkley in that running back room. I mean, you can't really go wrong with these 4 selections here. I think this is a great step in the right direction for the New York Giants and a great step in moving on from what has been a really ugly tenure for the last, I would say 3-4 years in New York. This is one that felt like it was a real page turner. And on top of that, it kind of felt like ownership finally took a step back, hands-off approach, and we allowed Brian Daboll and Joe Shane to kind of make the decisions that they need to make as the football guys in charge of the New York Football Giants and let them go after the guys that they want to go after here. And I've got to say, if you only came out of this draft with Carter, Dart, Darius Alexander, and Scatabo, I wouldn't be mad for this Giants team because that's a really solid 4 guys that I think in some capacity are going to be contributing in major ways for this team for, within the next 2 or 3 years, depending on what happens, obviously, at quarterback and everything. But this is a group of guys that I think could put on a lot for the Giants going forward. And I feel like Giants fans, you have a very good reason to feel good coming out of this draft class, if you were to ask me. But those are my winners and losers coming out of this year's NFL draft. Once again, fire away in the comment section down below. Let me hear from you all. Likes, dislikes from your favorite team, other teams around the league, head-scratching moves. We didn't even touch on one thing, the Atlanta Falcons. Just something I'll briefly, mention here as we say goodbye. Interesting to say the least. I like the double dip in edge rushers in the first round. Do I love the trade compensation they had to give up to get their second edge rusher in Pierce? Not necessarily, especially after watching what the Giants had to give up. I just feel like you didn't have to give up nearly as much, so the Rams kind of feel like they played the Falcons like a fiddle there, but it is what it is. But things like that, anything that stuck out from the draft, let me hear from you all. But as always, if you made it to the end, I greatly appreciate it. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe button, but I'll see you all next time. Have a good one.